and you want to go walk on a picket line? That was incredible. But if you look at recent past, and now all the people that want to be president, all of a sudden, they want to go on picket lines too. But Senator Sanders has been doing this for decades. And if you can watch the interactions that they have, that the candidates have, and Senator Sanders is pretty comfortable because he knows what's going on. He's been there. Some of them, the questions they ask, it's obvious this is their first time. You know, give them credit for showing up, but let's give Senator Sanders credit for having shown up for decades for American workers. Now, as a result of me being outspoken, Democrats say I'm outspoken, the Republicans tell me I have a big mouth. I was asked to run against somebody that you probably remember, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. That was the response we got everywhere. And I was like, well, if anybody's going to do it, I know nobody's going to work as hard as I am to chase him out. One of the people I called on to ask for help was Senator Bernie Sanders. He gave us very early support. And again, thinking, you know, other people thought I was crazy at first. It was like a union iron worker running up against the third most powerful Republican in the country. What kind of a chance do you have? Well, Senator Sanders, we had a lot of help from Iowa, too. I'm very grateful to all of you who did help us chase him out. I'm proud to say he's now known as former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Because what I used to like to do, I didn't like to do it, but I ended up doing it. The State of the Union address, whenever Paul Ryan was at the upper right-hand screen of my TV, I'd have to take my Proud to be a Union Thug t-shirt and drape it over that corner. So thankfully, thank you for all your help helping us get rid of him. Now, again, we have 50 days till the caucus is coming up, and that's quite an interesting process that I'm still learning about. But I'm confident with the results that I've seen knocking on doors and the time I've spent in Iowa that Senator Sanders is going to come out #1 right here in Iowa. Now, I just want to close with this, saying that what's coming up, this presidential election, when we get somebody to replace what we have now in the White House, I'd just like all the billionaires to remember, and those that have been taking advantage of us. I mean, I don't have a problem with wealthy people. I have a problem with greedy people. And just remember, we didn't start this class war, but we will finish it. And as I make my way up the stage, I'd just like to remind you, Senator Sanders is the one that's going to keep putting the move into movement. Have a fantastic day. Great to see you.
Please keep it going for Representative Jeff Kurtz.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Randy Bryce, Corey Bush, thank you so much. Get up and take a bow. Yeah. And we talked about this beforehand. Corey is from the good Bush family, so keep that in mind. And we've got another special guest today. We have Emiliano Vera, running for state representative in House District 93 in Illinois. Stand up, Emiliano. I just came from a rally for a bill, Senate File 1979, that requires 2 people on every freight train. We were at the Keokuk Labor Temple. Now, why is that important? Well, on July 6, 2013, in Lochmaganic, Canada, a rail accident incinerated 47 human beings and caused somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 million in damages and lawsuits to a town roughly half the size of Keokuk. It had a one-man crew. My rail labor brothers and sisters, some right here, some in front. They've come from all over the country this morning to draw attention to 1979 and to let Senator Bernie Sanders know how much we appreciate his sponsorship of this legislation. Now, the rail bosses, they oppose this bill. They say it just might, cost them a tiny fraction of their profits. And they're willing to gamble human safety, your safety and mine, to preserve those profits for their Wall Street masters. That's what corporations do. The health and welfare of people that do the work means almost nothing to them. If it did, they would be supporting Medicare for all instead of the system that we have now. A system where we pay vastly inflated prices for a vastly inferior product. A system where now life expectancy in the United States is going down, and deaths of people between the ages of 25 and 34 increased 29% between 2010 and 2017. Oh, but Medicare for all is expensive, they say, and they don't just say that on the right. We've got those people in our own party. And I say, you know what? Maybe we've already paid for it. Statistics show that working people really haven't had a raise for 45 years while productivity is shot through the roof. Maybe it's time for the people who have benefited from our hard work to pony up so we finally can get the health care the rest of the developed world has. I have a lot more I'd like to say about workers' rights, wage stagnation, climate change, health care, and other problems. But why talk about all our problems when the start of a solution to them can be defined in just 3 words? President Bernie Sanders. And that is why I'm honored to be one of his Iowa State co-chairs for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce the next President of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Keokuk, for coming out this afternoon. Let me thank Corey Bush. Where's Corey? Hey, Corey, thanks so much for being here. And let me thank Randy Bryce. Now, Randy is a modest guy, but I want you to know that he ran for Congress in Wisconsin 2018, and he forced Paul Ryan, the then Speaker of the House, out of the race, which set the groundwork for Democrats winning the House. So, Randy, thank you very much. And Jeff Kurtz, thank you so much for your longtime support and the great work you're doing in the legislature here. Let me thank, I think behind me we have the International Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. Guys, thank you so much for being here. What I want to do today, picking up on some of the points the previous speakers have made, is to talk a little bit about justice, something we don't talk about enough in America, and how we obtain justice. And to do that, we got to go back in history a little bit in America, and we have to be thinking about how real change takes place. And the one lesson we learn from history is that real fundamental change never takes place from the top on down, always the bottom on up. that if people moan and groan and live in despair and think they can't accomplish anything, they will accomplish nothing. But if you think about the history of our country, and we got some great trade unionists behind me, there was once a time, 150 years ago, longer than that, workers were considered to be chattel. They were nothing. An employer could do anything he wanted. You work 7 days a week, you're fired for no reason whatsoever. And workers stood up and said, you know what, we're not animals, we are human beings, and we will be treated with dignity. And workers fought to form unions to give them decent wages, decent benefit, but most importantly, dignity on the job. And that's the struggle of the trade union movement in this country. And you think about the struggles of women in this country. Hard to believe, 100 years ago, not a long time from an historical perspective, women in America did not have the right to vote. Women in America were told, the consciousness of the time, establishment consciousness, your job was to stay at home and make babies. You were not supposed to get a higher education. You were not supposed to do the work that your heart wanted you to do. The establishment defined you as to who you were supposed to be. But women, by the millions, and their male allies stood up and said, you know what? You will not define us. We will define our own dreams and aspirations, and we will not be second-class citizens. And we think about the horrific history of race in this country, the abomination of slavery, people being dragged here in chains, dying along the way by the millions, and the consciousness of who African Americans were in this country. But from way back when, African Americans and their allies stood up and said, this is wrong, this is immoral, this cannot be allowed to happen in America. And it was not just Dr. King who did it all. If he were here today, he would tell you that it was millions of people, African Americans and their white allies, who said, we are going to do everything humanly possible to end racism in this country. Millions of people looked up and they said, it is not acceptable that we have segregated schools, that African Americans can't vote, that kids can't go into restaurants, into movie theaters, and millions of people helped begin the process to make change. If I were here with you 30 years ago, and I said that in 2008, the United States of America would elect an African American as President of the United States, nobody in the room would have believed me. But it happened because people stood up and fought back. And the same thing is with the gay rights movement. We were here 20 years ago, and I would say to the people here in Keokuk that gay marriage would be legal in every state in this country. Nobody would have believed that possible. What is my point? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because change takes place when millions of people stand up and they look around them and they say, racism is not acceptable. It has got to change. Sexism is not acceptable. It has got to change. Homophobia is not acceptable. It has got to change. And that is the only way that change ever takes place. Nelson Mandela, one of my heroes and one of the great leaders in modern world history, said something that was very profound. I would like people to think about it. He said, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it happens." It always seems impossible until it happens. In other words, the idea that women would have the right to vote, that an African American would become president of the United States. It's impossible. It can't happen. But then when it happens, people say, well, no big deal. Of course, I mean, how could you think that women would not have the right to buy? How absurd can that be? But back 100 years ago, that is what people thought. So our challenge today is not just to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in American history. It is to do more than that. It is to transform this economy and this government so that it represents all of us and not just the 1%. So what I'm asking of you today is to understand that the many injustices which exist today can in fact be overcome, so that 100 years from now people will look back and say, I couldn't believe that, I couldn't believe this. Our job is not just to take on the greed of Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies and the military-industrial complex and the fossil fuel industry. We've got to do that. But our more difficult job is to change public consciousness in this country in terms of what we as human beings are entitled to. That is our major job. And when we do that, the other things will fall in place. So our campaign understands that we cannot continue to have in the White House a president who is a pathological liar, a president, and I say this, by the way, with full knowledge that Iowa voted for Trump, but there are a lot of people in Iowa, no matter what their political views are, who understands that we cannot continue having a president who lies every single day, whose word is worth nothing, a president who is running the most corrupt administration in modern American history, and you're going to see more about that in the impeachment process. A president who is, and it gives me no joy to say this, it truly does not, who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a homophobe, who is a xenophobe, and who is a religious bigot. And again, I am not proud to have to say that I have. I'm a U.S. Senator, I'm a former congressman, and I have known many, many conservatives who I disagree with on many issues. But that doesn't make them racist or sexist or homophobes. But that is what we have in the White House today. And that is a temperament, and that is a president who we cannot continue to have in the White House, and we will beat him and beat him bad in 2020. Now, when we talk about justice, what are we talking about? Let me lay out for you very briefly what the progressive agenda is. The progressive agenda says that in Iowa or in Vermont or Missouri or wherever, when you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. And the progressive agenda says, if you look at Iowa and many other states around this country, we have a $7.25 minimum wage. Does anybody here believe that anybody in Iowa or America can live on $7.25 an hour or $8 or $10 an hour? Talked to a woman in Des Moines a couple of months ago, trying to raise 3 kids on $10 an hour. She can't do it. So what justice is about is raising the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. Justice is about equal pay for equal work, so that women don't make 70, 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. Justice is about saying that in America, if you're one of the millions of working people who wants to join a union, you should be able to join that union without employer harassment. Which is why we have introduced the strongest labor law reform legislation in the modern history of America, which in my view will double trade union membership in this country in a 4-year period. Justice is about understanding that we have an infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, public schools, housing, which is in desperate need of repair, and that we can create millions of good-paying jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. That's justice. And justice is about understanding that education is inherent to everything that we do as human beings. We should be learning from the day we are born to the day we die. And in the richest country in the history of the world, which is what we are, we should and must have the best educational system in the world. Justice is about not accepting the current reality that millions and millions of working class families in Iowa, in Vermont, all over this country cannot find quality, affordable child care for the little ones. The psychologists tell us that 0 through 4 are the most important years of human development intellectually and emotionally. And yet we have kids all over this country who are in inadequate child care facilities with underpaid child care workers. If we love our country, we love our children, we must have universal, high-quality, affordable child care for every kid in this country. We must strengthen public education in America. I don't want kids going to school who are hungry. I don't want teachers having to take money out of their own limited salaries to buy school supplies. I don't want kids in low-income communities all over this country dropping out of school without the education and job training they need to succeed in life. And that is why we are going to invest significantly in public education. Triple funding for low-income Title I schools. Substantially increased funding for those schools who are dealing with kids with disabilities. And I'll tell you what else we're going to do. We are going to rethink what education means to our country. And that is, we're going to put education up here as a major priority, and we are going to make sure that no teacher in America earns less than $60,000 a year. I want our best and brightest young people to be able to say, you know what, I am so excited. I am going into teaching. And teaching is about as important a job as anybody can do. And I'm going to earn a good salary and have a great career. That's what I want the future of education to be about, attracting the best and the brightest and respecting educators. And when we talk about education, we have got to make it clear. And again, this is the vision for the future. These are not radical ideas. And I want 100 years from now or 50 years from now, people to look back and say, what was the big deal? Of course that was right. But I want every kid in this country, regardless of his or her income, to be able to get a higher education. Four years ago, when I came to Iowa, I said we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free. It was seen as a radical idea. Well, guess what's happening all over the country? In California, New Mexico, in New York, state after state, county after county, moving in the direction of making public colleges and universities. If we are elected together, we will make public colleges and universities, HBCUs, tuition-free all over this country. And when we talk about justice, I want you to think about another thing. 11 years ago, as all of you remember, Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who nearly destroyed our economy. 2 years ago, Congress, against my vote, gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. If we could bail out Wall Street, if we can give tax breaks to billionaires, we can cancel all student debt in this country. And we pay for that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. Now, I disagree with Donald Trump on virtually everything. Not a surprise. But there is one area where Trump's ignorance and arrogance is not only hurting our country, but is hurting in a very dangerous way the entire world. And that is his refusal to acknowledge the reality of climate change. So I want to tell you some scary stuff, and then tell you what I think we should do about it. What the scientists are now telling us, which is very scary, is they have underestimated the degree and severity in which climate change is ravaging our country and the entire world. They underestimated the speed in which the polar ice caps are melting, and that the oceans are warming, resulting in rising sea levels, which by the end of the century, if we do not get our act together, will leave major cities in America, I'm talking about Miami, Charleston, South Carolina, New York City, many others, major countries, Vietnam, Bangladesh, cities, counties, cities, and communities all over the world underwater by the end of the century. We will see increased droughts, which will impact farming right here in Iowa and in the Midwest, where farmers will have shorter growing seasons. Crop production will go down. The quality of the food being produced will deteriorate. What we are seeing is a growth in extreme weather disturbances. Some of you may have seen one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Venice, Italy, underwater last month because of a torrential downpour. Same thing happened to Houston, Texas. We are seeing more and more extraordinary, unprecedented extreme weather disturbances. What the scientists are telling us is that we will see a growth in disease because various types of bacteria thrive on warm weathers. In Minnesota, the moose, beautiful animals, are being killed off because ticks are attacking them. Ticks who would have been killed in cold weather, but are now literally sucking the blood right out of moose in Minnesota. Same thing happening in New Hampshire, some of it in Vermont. You're going to see malaria spreading to areas that had not previously been seen. So you're going to see the growth of disease. You're going to see, according to the United Nations, hundreds of millions of climate refugees, people all over the world who are living in communities where they cannot find clean drinking water anymore, or where they cannot grow their crops, and they're going to be migrating. And when large numbers of people migrate, you're going to have international conflict and war. That is what we are looking at if we do not get our act together, and get it together very shortly. And in that regard, I am proud to tell you that we have listened to the scientists and have introduced the most comprehensive and sweeping climate change proposal ever introduced by any candidate for federal office. Now, my opponents will say, Bernie, it's a very expensive proposal. Can we afford it? And my response is, how much is too much to protect the very existence of our planet? How much is too much? And this is an issue that many would like to run away from. You got Trump denying the reality, and you got others saying, well, yeah, climate change is real, but we got to be modest about what we can do about it. This is not a time to be modest or to take half measures. We are fighting to make sure that our kids and grandchildren and future generations will have a planet that is healthy and is habitable. And we have a moral responsibility to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and to tell them in no uncertain terms that their profits are not more important than the future of this planet. And our proposal, which is based on an outline called the Green New Deal, our proposal will create up to 20 million good-paying jobs in this country as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. So this is an issue that we have got to face. It is a moral issue. And I, as President of the United States, intend not only to help transform our energy system here, but we have to lead the entire world. This is not an American issue. It's a Chinese issue, an Indian issue, Pakistani issue, Brazilian issue. This is an issue that is going to impact virtually every country on earth. And we need American leadership to tell the people of the world that maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we should pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. And when we talk about a progressive agenda, and when we talk about justice, we understand that we have to fundamentally transform a broken and racist criminal justice system. It is not a... This is the United States. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We have more people in jail today than any other country on earth, including communist China, an authoritarian society 4 times our size. So what we are going to do is invest in our young people in jobs and education, not more jails and more incarceration. Today in America, quite unbelievable. Many people don't know this. As we speak, we got about 2 million people in federal, state, and local jails. We have about 400,000 people right now, this afternoon, who are behind bars, having been convicted of nothing. How does that happen? They cannot afford cash bail. So they are arrested, maybe they're guilty, maybe they're not. And they're in jail, they need $500 to get out of jail or wait their trial. They don't have the $500. 400,000 people in jail. We're going to eliminate cash bail in this country. We are going to eliminate private prisons and detention centers because corporations should not be making money for locking up our fellow Americans. You don't need an incentive to lock up more people. We want disincentives, not more incentives. And the other thing that we're going to do, this is a big deal, and I'm proud that over the last 4 years, I raised this issue 4 years ago, and it is catching on, and it's going to happen. Question is sooner or later. We've got to end the destructive war on drugs. This so-called war on drugs has been terribly destructive to this country, especially to the African American and Latino community, but to people all across this country. And what we are going to do is legalize the sale of marijuana in every state in America. Let me ask a question. I don't know the situation here in Iowa. Raise your hand if you know somebody who has been arrested for possession of marijuana. Look around you. That is a lot of people. And that's the kind of hands that I see in every event that we do. We are going to expunge the records of those who have been arrested for possession of marijuana. And I'll tell you what else we are going to do, and this is an idea that I didn't come up with. I got a big ego, but I have to confess I didn't come up with this one. This came from our friends in the African American and Latino community. What they said, Bernie, look, this country is moving toward the legalization of marijuana. We appreciate you're going to do that in 50 states in the country. That's great. But it is wrong to allow a handful of major corporations to control the legal marijuana market. And it was a funny thing. I was driving through, I think it was Nevada, and they got these big billboards up there, buy marijuana, you know, blah, 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 it's legal there. And I was just thinking, you know, here you have companies, big companies, selling marijuana while people are rotting in jail for having done exactly the same thing. So what we are going to do, and we've come up with a proposal to do that, is to help those people in the African American and Latino and other communities that have been hit hardest by the war on drugs be able to get into a legal business to sell marijuana and help undo some of the damage of the war on drugs. We are, as an administration, going to end the demonization of undocumented people in this country. The truth is, despite Trump's ravings and racism on this issue, the American people want us to move to comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for the 11 million undocumented. And on my first day in office, we will reestablish legal status for the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And under our administration, federal agents will never be snatching babies from the arms of their mothers. All of us, it seems every week, every 2 weeks, are horrified, sick to our stomachs. You turn on the TV, and there is another mass shooting. What I will tell you very simply is that gun policy under our administration will not be determined by the NRA, but by the American people. And the elements, I won't go into the whole approach, but the elements of real, sane gun policy legislation includes universal expanded background checks. It means doing away with the so-called gun show loophole. It means doing away with the straw man provision where you can legally buy a gun and then sell it through criminal elements, and also includes what the American people now want, and that is a ban on the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. When you think about political hypocrisy, and we can go on for many hours talking about political hypocrisy, one of the clearest examples of it is when we hear my conservative colleagues, the House and the Senate, they talk about wanting to get government off the backs of the people. You ever hear that? Talk about small government. Well, I say to those conservatives, if you believe in getting government off the backs of the American people, understand that it is women in this country who must control their own bodies, not the government. So my pledge to you is that I will never, ever nominate anyone to the U.S. Supreme Court who is not 100% Roe v. Wade. All right, let me conclude by saying this, and I'll open it up to some questions. We have to hit the road. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to hear what your questions and comments are. Let me just say this. I'm a United States Senator, and I deal with wealth and power and lobbyists and corporate interests every day. I see it in Washington. I know what it's about. And the 1% and the corporate elite have enormous power. You do not know how much money they have. They have literally unlimited amounts of money. Unlimited. They can do anything they want, run all the TV ads they want, and everything else, buy all the politicians they want. Talking about the pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, turns out that they spent $4 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions over the last 20 years. That's why they get what they want. And the insurance companies spend all kinds of money. And by the way, when we talk about health care, let me tell you that throughout my entire life, what I have believed is that health care is a human right, not a privilege. And what that means is, again, not a radical idea. I want you all to understand it exists in almost every other country on earth, major countries. What Medicare for all means is you go to any doctor you want, you go to any hospital you need to go to, and you do not have to take out your wallet or your credit card. Because under Medicare for all, we do away with all premiums for workers and their employers. We do away with all co-payments. We do away with all deductibles. Take a step back and think what an insane concept a deductible is. You're supposed to have insurance to be able to go to the doctor when you're sick. But before you can go to that doctor, you got to take $5,000 or $10,000, depending on your plan, out of your own pocket. We're doing away with all deductibles. You go to the doctor when you're sick. We're doing away with all out-of-pocket expenses, because I do not want to continue a situation where 500,000 Americans are going bankrupt because of medically related bills. I was in Pittsburgh just the other day talking to a woman who literally works at the largest hospital in Pittsburgh. She developed breast cancer, and the bills, she had insurance, But the bills, despite her insurance started coming in, she cannot pay the bills. So if a working class person gets sick, whether it's cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's in the family, whatever it may be, why should we allow a situation to continue where families are in financial ruin? For what? What did they do? Did they gamble away their money? Did somebody make a risky investment? They got sick. And yet 500,000 people in this country go bankrupt because they get sick. That is not a system that we can accept, in my view. And we cannot accept that system because we are spending twice as much per person on health care as the people of any other nation, and yet you got 87 million people uninsured or underinsured, 30,000 who die each year because they don't get to a doctor on time. So I know I've been criticized up and down. I've been criticized by Trump and his friends, criticized by the healthcare industry, criticized by the Democratic establishment. But I believe that healthcare is a human right, and we will pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Last point that I want to make, we'll open up the questions. I always say last point, and I go on for about 3 hours, so forgive me. Because there really is a lot to discuss, but I got to go to 2 other meetings and the rest during the day. And that is, I have friends, candidates for president, who say, yep, we got a super PAC, and some of the wealthiest people in America contributing to our super PAC. It doesn't matter. I really don't pay attention to those people. And we got other people who run around the country going to wealthy people's homes and raising all kinds of money and leaving with $100,000, $200,000. They say, nah, it doesn't matter. Those contributions don't impact me. So I got a simple question. If these contributions don't impact you, why do you think the wealthiest people in America are contributing to you? Do you think they're dummies? And the answer is they're not dummies. They may be greedy, but they're not dummies. They are making investments. And that means they get access to the candidates, and if those candidates win, to elected officials. That is why we have a Congress right now, where if Mitch McConnell, Republican leader in the Senate, were here today, he would tell you, he's been public about it, and I credit his honesty. He would say we need more tax breaks for billionaires, and we got to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's what Mitch McConnell would tell you. Where does that idea come from? Does it come from Main Street in Iowa? I don't think so. Not Main Street in Vermont. This is what the rich and the powerful want. That is what they are paying for. And our job is to create a vibrant democracy where we listen to ordinary people who do not want tax breaks for billionaires, but they want justice. And I'll tell you lastly, what I am extremely proud of is that in this campaign, up to this moment, we have received more campaign contributions, over 4 million, from more Americans, over 1.2 million Americans who've contributed, an average of $18 contribution. We've received more contributions from more people than any candidate in the history of the United States of America. So this is a campaign of the working people, by the working people, and for the working people. And that is why we're going to win here in Iowa, win the nomination, and defeat Donald Trump. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay. Jesse, how many microphones do we have? Where's the other one? All right, we got Misty is back there. Okay. Any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. Questions or comments? I see a woman right here. Jesse? Just give us your name if you could, please.
How would you specifically start to change the climate change situation for the world?
We would move as aggressively as we humanly possible to end the production of fossil fuel, make massive investments in retrofitting our homes and our buildings, massive investments in wind and solar, massive investments in all of the components. We were driving here, we saw a Siemens factory where they're producing wind turbines. Iowa is one of the leading states in the country. In wind, you're getting about a third of your electricity. But we got to do that all over the country. We need more wind energy, we need more solar energy, we need more geothermal energy, we need more investment in new technologies, we need a new transportation system. We have to be producing the technology for the rest of the world. All right? So we will move aggressively, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that these kids up here will be living in a planet and a country that is healthy and habitable. Okay, other questions or comments? I see a woman right there. Ma'am in the green sweater.
Hi, I'm from St. Louis. I came with Corey.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, given the fact that we are tossing babies into jails, will you not only go after them, but every person, every professional that knew that these children were being abused and being in a detention center is abuse itself, that they will face criminal prosecution for child abuse, neglect, and endangerment like they should?
Here is my problem. I'm going to get into all of the details. But on day one, this country's approach toward immigration will fundamentally change. Trust me, children will not be separated from their mothers. They will not be locked up in jails. Okay, I see a question right there. Sir? Yeah.
President Sanders, doesn't that sound good? Will you on day one sign the executive order that cancels every damn one that Trump signed?
It's going to be a long day, but I think we're going to end up doing that. You know, I made so many promises on day one that if you see me on day two looking very tired and haggard, it's because I was up all night signing these executive orders. But we will certainly, the answer is there's a lot to be done. You all know, that a president has a lot of power through executive order, and the ugly executive orders, of which they are many, that Trump did, I will absolutely overturn all of those through executive order. But on the other hand, we're going to have to push legislation. Not everything is done through executive order. Okay. Yeah, right back here. Yes.
I would like to thank you on behalf of SMART, Sheet Metal Air Transportation Union, for co-sponsoring S-1979, the Safe Freight Act. It's the most important bill for our membership, and it's so important for you to be behind us on keeping 2 people on all freight trains in America. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Not only do we want the safe transportation of freight, that's what he's talking about. We got to do even more than that. We have to rebuild our rail system in this country. All right? Right now, we are behind many other countries. You correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of our rail system is old, outdated. Yup.
Passenger rail, we're way behind.
All right. There's no reason for that, especially if you're interested in climate change. You want to keep cars off the road, invest in 21st century rail, and we will do that. Thank you. Yes, woman right there.
Will you recognize and pressure China to stop discrimination against the Uyghur Chinese minority?
This is not just discrimination. It's a lot more than that. All of you know, or should know, that China has thrown about 1 million Muslims behind bars. They call them educational camps. Well, it's a funny kind of school when you have barbed wire surrounding that school. So the answer is yes, we will condemn human rights violations, including that one in China, all over the world. And you raise there's almost not enough time to get into all the issues, and we didn't talk about foreign policy, but let me just say that, and thanks for the question, is this country was once a beacon of hope for people all over the world in terms of our strongly held views on democracy and human rights. Now, were we perfect? Did we violate our own vision? God knows we did. But that was what we held up as a beacon of hope throughout the world. And now we have a president who has an affinity for authoritarian governments all over the world and constantly is in a battle of words with our long-standing democratic allies. Well, we're going to change that. I want, once again, the world to know that this country believes in democracy, believes in human rights, and you don't throw 1 million people into jail in China because their religion is different than the majority. Okay, I see a hand right here, woman in blue.
Our country has become very divided over the last 3 and some
Yes.
years. How would you bring about cohesion in the country for all Americans?
Thank you. Well, that is a very important question. Let me give you a tiny example, if I may, and I'll elaborate on it. A couple of hours ago, we held a meeting in Burlington, Iowa. And of course, I come from Burlington, Vermont, so it was nice to be in Burlington, Iowa. But I'll give you an example, just picking up on your question. Major League Baseball, as you may know, I know this is not the major issue facing our civilization, but Major League Baseball has come up with a proposal to eliminate 42 minor league teams, including the team in Burlington and 2 other, in the Quad Cities and in Clinton, to get rid of those and get rid of my team in Burlington, Vermont. 42 communities around America. And we're going to fight that proposal as hard as we can because we think that minor league baseball adds a whole lot to communities all over this country. I know what it's done for Burlington. I helped bring the baseball team there when I was mayor. But this is an example of whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, a conservative or progressive. You know what? You like the idea of your kid going out to a minor league baseball game, right? Getting the autograph of the ball players and all that stuff. So it's one thing we're going to do, but we have bigger ideas than that. Here is the thing. You are quite right that the nation is divided, and Trump has thrived and, in fact, helped push that divisiveness. He has made, that's me, let me turn it off. That's my wife, tell her I was busy, all right? All right. And Trump has gone out of his way to divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born and all that stuff. But that's the bad news. The good news is that when you look at the issues that people are concerned about, you know what? There are quite strong majorities of working people, no matter whether they're Republican or Democrat, who actually agree. Should we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Overwhelming support for that. Should we demand that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes? Overwhelming support of that. Should we cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid? Hell no, whether you're Republican or a Democrat. Is climate change real? More and more people understand that reality and the need to deal with it. So my point is, as president, the way you deal with divisiveness is bring people together around the issues they are concerned about. Whether you are a conservative Republican or a progressive Democrat, you want your kid to have quality education and access to the best quality health care. Is that right? We bring people together around those issues. Okay. I see a woman right here, ma'am. Stand up. Let's get her a mic. Misty? Yeah.
I have a daughter who's finishing up her last year and a half of college, and she's going to be a school teacher.
Wonderful.
What are your plans on fixing the school system so the teachers can also have a living wage and not have to work 2 jobs.
Thank you very much. When we reorder priorities in America and we say tax breaks for billionaires is not what is important. Building a wall separating the United States from Mexico is not a major priority. Education is a major priority. So if we make that determination, that is something I believe in. I don't know how, as a country, we survive in a competitive global economy unless our kids have the best education in the world. And that is not the case right now. All right, I have talked, as you have said, to teachers who are now leaving the profession after being teachers for years because they can't make enough money to survive. I was in New Hampshire, and a woman who's a teacher said, you know, my son was educated, just graduated college. He wants to be a music teacher in high school. It turns out that he got a job at a state liquor store making more money than being a teacher. That is a bad set of priorities. So what we are going to say is, if we love the kids, we love the educators. If we love the educators, they have got to be compensated with the kinds of money they need in order to go into the profession. So I don't want people to sacrifice to become teachers. I want them to go into teachers because it's an enormously important job, but they must be well compensated. Our goal is that no teacher in America should make less than $60,000 a year. Okay. Let me apologize. We've got 2 more meetings down the road. I just want to thank everybody for being out. I don't have to tell anybody here that Iowa plays an outsized role in American politics. You're the first to vote. We believe, because we have a great staff. Misty, raise your hand, jump up and down. Misty is our campaign director. Where were you born? Where were you raised, Misty? What town?
Gilman.
All right. All right. So she knows the state very well. We got a great team, a great volunteer network. With your help, we're going to win here in Iowa. We're going to win in New Hampshire. We're going to win the Democratic nomination and beat Trump. Thank you all very much.